This is Israeli Technology Founders Speak, a podcast of conversations with successful Israeli high-tech and biotech entrepreneurs. With your host, Avraham Hermon. Keren Leshem is the CEO of Ocon Healthcare, an Israeli biotech startup that innovates, manufactures, and commercializes cutting-edge women's health products, such as their Intra Uterine Ball, which can carry multiple drugs to the uterus to treat a variety of conditions. Keren brings over 20 years of experience in the medical device and pharmaceutical industries, specializing in the management of innovative startups, strategy, commercialization, and financing. She was recently dubbed one of the 3 women shaping the future of women's health by Forbes Magazine. Avraham sat down with Keren in the offices of Ocon Healthcare, where they discussed the challenges of growing a startup, what's unique about building a startup in Israel, what it's like to be a female CEO, the role of patents in their business, tips for startup founders, and much more. This podcast is a creation of J.M.B. Davis Ben David, an intellectual property law firm serving clients around the world. You have great innovations. We keep them safe. It's not enough to just have a great startup idea or innovation. If you don't legally protect your innovations, products, and brand, anyone can claim them as their own. We keep your great innovations secure. Learn more by going to jmbdavis.com. That's jmbdavis.com.
Keren, thank you for inviting me to your office and letting me interview you this morning. And I'm excited to hear about Ocon Healthcare. What problem does Ocon Healthcare solve?
So first of all, good morning, Avraham, and thank you for coming here and for your interest to learn more about Ocon. What problem do we solve? So I think the whole world is going into more of a personalized type healthcare and treatment. And Ocon chose to look at women's health specifically through the uterus. And we design a stent that knows to fit itself to the uterine size, contraction, and the fact that it's a cavity. And on this stent, we deliver drugs to treat multiple conditions in women's health.
So there are a lot of companies out there that are making intrauterine devices, right? So what makes your company unique?
So I think that intrauterine devices haven't had a facelift in tens and tens of years. Mm-hmm. I think the last one to have or brought innovation was really the hormonal version of a T-shaped IUD. It's amazing to realize that through a few years ago, everybody thought the uterus was flat. It's not. It's a cavity. And in a cavity, if you place a 2-dimensional plastic large IUD, you get tons of drawbacks. It's painful. It hurts. It malpositions. It breaks. And what Ocon has developed, we really developed a very soft, smaller stent. It's about 1/3 in size that fits itself to this cavity. So it doesn't have any sharp edges. It doesn't malposition. And it just introduces better quality ingredients into the uterus. So this is really the new generation of IUDs, intrauterine devices.
So do you want to tell us, Keren, how this IUD works and how it's different?
First of all, it has the thinnest insertion tube in the world. So it's very, very, very thin. And what it does, it basically turns backwards or folds into a ball within the uterus itself. And that's one of the patents that we have around the product itself. So we own the 3D space in the uterus because of the way the design is to fold backwards and really protect the lining and the walls of the uterus from perforations. Once it folds, it really carries on it the various drugs or hormones or therapeutics that it requires. And it sits there comfortably.
So how long can this device be used for?
Well, it really depends on what we're treating. So our first product, for example, is for contraception. It could live in the woman's body up to 5 years. Mm-hmm. Our second product doesn't live in the body. It goes in and out to treat a different condition. So it really delivers a certain chemical to ablate bleeding tissue. The third product, again, would be a product that would be in for months, years, or even up to a decade, delivering hormones and other APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, to really treat an array of diseases.
Mm-hmm. And briefly, what stage is your first product? How advanced is that? Where are you with that product?
So we actually have a whole platform of products. Our first one is already commercial in countries outside the US, Europe, Israel, South America, South Africa. We're very soon going to be launching in Canada, also Mexico and Central America.
Wow.
So we really signed exciting agreements also in China and Japan. So we're really kind of, making the footprint bigger. This is our first product. Our second product is in phase 2B clinical studies. So it's pretty advanced. We have one more study to go after this study, which will be our pivotal study for FDA approval. And last but not least, we have a working prototype on our third product, which is the hormonal delivery for the various treatments of endometriosis, contraception, of course, abnormal uterine bleeding. And then we can also load active ingredients for fibroids and menopause. So exciting. We have a whole platform of products.
So briefly, how is the market relating to your product that's been launched?
I think there were some mistakes done in the initial launch of the product. I think companies really need to understand what the product that they own can do. For example, our first product is not a better product in terms of efficacy. It won't give better contraception effect because it uses the same technology as the older version or traditional IUDs. But it is a safer product. We know that it's a more convenient product. It's more comfortable to wear. It has a higher safety profile because of ectopic pregnancies, because of bleeding, and because of pain. And so understanding that and understanding how to insert it, which is very different from a traditional way of inserting, taught us a lot. I think women are super excited about the product. They're super excited to learn that there are more options than the options that existed, which were traditional and very few. I think it's great that we have more women targeted as clinical studies, because most clinical studies are not done on women because of the hormonal flux that we have every month. So here's a company who really takes women and only women into account. And so I think there's a general excitement about the products and the outlay and the future of products that we will bring for women.
I wanted to know how the idea was born and how you became involved in it.
So actually, the idea was born from a very perceptive gynecologist, an Israeli gynecologist who, in addition to the various treatments that he's done for women, realized that women come and complain a lot about their IUDs. And in the earlier days, there was only the one-dimensional or two-dimensional, ultrasound. You couldn't really see a malposition. Perforations were very hard to detect. But slowly he came to the realization that these IUDs are too big for the average cavity. And he realized that a ball shape would be a much better fitting way to deliver drugs and contraception into the uterus. And so he started working on how to address this issue because the cervix, the way to the uterus, is very, very narrow. So how do you get a ball up into the uterus through a very narrow cervix? And that's how he designed and chose nitinol as a stent and chose the balls of the copper and invented this fantastic innovation, which, by the way, I'm using as well, and I can tell you I enjoy very much. This gynecologist, his name is Dr. Ilan Baram. So he was the founder of the company. I got involved about 2.5 years ago. So the company was already 8 years old, and I was brought in to try to assess and help how to create a bigger footprint of sales across the world. And so that's how I started my journey with Ocon.
So that's interesting. So nitinol is the substance that it's made out of. And that's typically used for stents for all sorts of applications. And here, the inventor decided to use it for something else that hasn't been used for before, right?
Correct. Nitinol has a memory shape. So you can design it to be any shape you wish, and it will keep its shape for years on the shelf. And so, of course, the product is introduced in a straight line into the uterus, where it folds and always will retain its shape.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about IP. So what role does intellectual property and specifically patents have in your business strategy?
So this is a super interesting question because I think this is the number one driver to make the decision to keep this company funded and alive and to really push forward to change the management and to do the full restart up that we've done. The patents in Ocon are so strong and they really demonstrate how with some thought, very early on thought, you can really manage to grab a footprint in the area that you want to cater to. So, for example, Ocon has 3 families of patents, and the first family talks about the stent itself or the 3D space in the uterus. So we own that. We really own the 3D space in the uterus. You can put a T, a line, a triangle. You cannot put 2 arcs. These 2 arcs that fold into a ball, that belongs to Ocon, and this has been granted all over the world, in Israel, the United States, all across Europe, China, Canada, you name it. That's the first family of patents. The second family of patents talks about what you can put on this frame. And again, here, it's a very, very strong patent, recently granted in the United States. And it talks about the fact that we can put any active ingredient on this frame, any active ingredient, and it really mandates or sets apart the various different APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients. So it could be any hormone, any pharmaceutical, any chemical, or any active ingredient. That's the patent. So the patent is very strong. And the third one, of course, talks about any formulations that we've done to these active ingredients. So obviously, copper and hormones cannot be patented. These are very old and known substances, but we do have patents around other indications such as abnormal uterine bleeding, where the third family of patents kind of kick in. So it's a very well thought out strategy for patents. And I think that at the end of the day, this is the strength of the company to be able to bring innovation, but also protect it and to be a leader in this space. So very proud of this portfolio.
What difficulties did you have in the process of bringing this idea to the market? And you mentioned the re-startup, the reorganization of the startup. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that.
I think it's easier to say what we didn't face. Everything. I think the company was a bit stagnant for about 8 years. The former management were really focusing on one product to bring it to market. And they did that really well. They did that quickly. They got a CE and started really getting it to the hands of women and doctors across Europe and Israel. I think they kind of missed on the value of the platform. And that's one of the things that we changed quickly, was the strategy to see that there is a platform here and it's not just a one-off product. We also realized that this platform is a pharmaceutical therapeutic platform and not a device per se, which also has a much higher, let's say, interest and a much higher return on investment to the investors. And also, I think that when you look at the operations, sometimes I always say you need luck. 8 years ago, nobody cared about women's health. There was 1 or 2 exits. It wasn't a very discussed topic. In the last 2 years, we've seen mergers and acquisitions and investments in women's health that is just keep on growing. And it's really exciting to be in this space now because now we can make an impact. And now there's a lot more room for women's health companies. And we've recently even won a tech pioneer recognition by the World Economic Forum, 1 in 100 companies that are creating impact in the world. This is so exciting for us to see that women's health as a topic is getting noticed, but also because what we're doing is so close to our hearts and so needed for women's health and women's well-being. So we've been through a whole lot.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like quite an adventure. In terms of funding, you mentioned briefly funding. Can you explain a little bit about your pathway to funding and throughout the course of the startup?
So the company was funded in various rounds and raised almost $20 million and up to the point where we restarted it. Restarting a company is not easy. It's not easy on the team. It's not easy on the management. It's not easy on the board. It's not easy on the investors. It's not easy on the market. And so it's been a very, very tough road to get investors to believe that new management can really make a difference and change the strategy and the company and the milestones and really the trajectory. And also, it also means that there's still a ways to go before you can become a platform company. And so investments were very difficult in the beginning. I admire the investors that came in and took a huge risk. I'm talking about 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago, putting money on me as a leader of this company, but also on the team and also on the market. And so I really admire these investors, and they've supported us really from the restart itself. And of course, the new investors that came in, if these are people like you and I that came in from a certain crowdfunding campaign, or people on LinkedIn that wanted to join the cause and put in their own money that we've had as well, all the way to family offices that joined us. It's a very tiring process because you have to keep going at the fundraising in order to elevate the company's valuation, in order to really be able to get a bigger ticket or a bigger chunk, which is what we've done in the past 2 years. So now that we've put together our strategy and we have all our ducks in a row, we've recently also reached a few very, very important milestones for the company. So now that we've increased our valuation, now we can go out and do a bigger round. I think now will be a lot easier, and the risk has been reduced very, very substantially.
I guess with the product in the market also, it's different than before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're located here in Israel in Modi'in, and maybe you could tell us what is unique about a startup originating in Israel with Israeli technology.
Well, first of all, I'm so Zionistic. I'm a little crazy. I believe that everything here is just the best. We have the Jewish mind, and it's incredible what Dr. Avraham, brought to fruition. I really admire that. I think that we have the chutzpah and the creative thinking of really getting, program and progress off the ground. I think we do need help with a support system around us on how to reach countries like the US, like China, like Europe, help with strategy. We need a strong board, and we need strong mentors around us to really help us understand where, the best fight is to fight. And I can tell you that I'm involved in 8400 that are doing exactly that. I myself, surround myself with a lot of people that are considered industry experts. I always say that I never signed off on being smart, but I do know how to put people around me that are smart and that can help.
That's important. Can you explain a little bit to our listeners about 8400?
Sure. I think this is a wonderful initiative. They bring together not only industry, but also government policies and money, and they put together people from the ecosystem to make sure we can help and assist each other and bring the funding that is necessary and really cater from each other's experience. I'm a mentor in the 8400 program, and I can tell you both I receive so much from the mentorship, but also my mentee from the experiences that I've had. And I also learn from her, from the questions that she asks on how to really navigate this very, very lonely journey of being an entrepreneur and really putting a company together. And I always say that mentorship is super important, but also your team. So you got to get a good team around you and get a mentor, or even join an accelerator, something that you can do this so that you're not absolutely alone with your thoughts and with your ideas. Just sanity checks, basically.
Yeah, I have a few other clients and acquaintances that I know that are in this 8400 program. So I've heard a lot about it, and it's been helping people. In terms of challenges for women founders, now we're sitting in a women's health company and the CEO is a woman. Do you think that there are challenges associated with women in leadership roles, especially CEO of companies in Israel?
Only when I started working for Ocon, which is a women's health, women-led company, is when I started talking about, the differences maybe between men and women in leadership positions, because I've never seen myself as a woman or a man. I always saw myself as a professional. Leading a company or doing business development or whatever job I ever had, I always saw myself as a team member, right? It never went to women or man place. But since this discussion has risen, I do see much difference in the way I present to men investors, for example, versus how I present to women investors, for example. With men, I really focus on the size of the opportunity and the market and, the team I've built around me of men, some of them, to really make sure they realize that I'm just the orchestrator and this is a great opportunity for a return on investment. With the women investors, I can touch on the need and, what we're solving and the impact, where I think they can relate a lot more. Even if the market size could be less, which is not in women's health. We're 50% of the population. Sure. And, so many women suffer from so many diseases around the uterus. But even though they can see the impact and the stories and the problem that we're solving. So there is a difference in the narrative when I pitch to men and pitch to women. But again, I'm not a very feminist in the way that, because I'm a woman, I'm treated differently. I don't feel that, and I don't see that. I think it's hard to manage a women's health company because there's less money and opportunities in women's health. But I think that is also changing now. And I think that there are sources of funding. And I think that the latest exits and mergers and acquisitions have done really well for the market. So we'll see it to continue growing in the next 5 years. I'm excited.
I'm optimistic. What tips do you have for founders or other people who have ideas, just starting with their new idea, with their company?
Wow. As I mentioned, I think that your support system is the most important. Get a mentor, someone you trust. In Hebrew, we say taseh l'charav. It's true. You really need someone you trust, that you can talk to, that you can be absolutely open about your fears, about your thoughts, about your strategy, and someone that can help you along the way that doesn't have a vested interest one way or the other. So a mentor is super important. And if you're really, really starting out with just an idea and you haven't done it before, I highly recommend joining the ecosystem through an accelerator or some sort of incubator, because they really organize people around you to support you on all the different decision processes that you need to make. If it's on the product, and if it's on the engineering, and if it's on the IP, and if it's on the legal aspects of everything, and if it's in the business development, and if it's in the marketing or the market opportunity. And so I really think it's important to join an accelerator, facilitator, incubator, but on the other hand, get yourself a mentor that you trust that could also open their network and help you. Those are my two, biggest recommendations for starting founders. It's a very lonely journey when you start out something and you're unsure and you don't know, and there's so many questions. I really recommend that.
Okay, that sounds good. And it sounds like you're also taking that role as a mentor seriously and mentoring other startup founders.
And by the way, I have a mentor too. I have two of them, right? So it never stops. You never stop learning. You never stop growing. And there's always someone that can teach you something. So I'm blessed with two mentors that I find to be extremely, extremely important in my journey.
So we discussed your products, that you have a product on market and you have two products in various stages of development. But where do you see your company down the road in a few years?
Well, again, being a crazy Zionist, I want to build the biggest women's health company. I want to make sure that we treat all the conditions we can possibly can. From the uterus. These are huge, multi-billion-dollar markets. And the need is really necessary for these different diseases. But I also want to build the biggest AI in women's health. We wear these devices in our bodies anyway. Why not put a chip on these devices and learn? I want to learn everything we can on the microbiome in the uterus, on fertility. I want to learn everything we can learn about vitamins and minerals and even diabetes. There's so much life and prolific and stem cells and blood in the uterus where we can learn so much. So that's really my dream, is to really build something big around women's health. Hopefully in the future, Ocon will be in a position to add external innovation, not only for uterine delivery, but also vaginal delivery. So these are things that I'm now looking at growing once we stabilize our platform and really bring some of this innovation to the US markets as well.
Wow. So this sounds like a different path than a lot of the startups that I speak to that are talking about being acquired by other companies or selling. And here you have a vision, long-term vision for the future. And that's good to hear.
Well, we're going to need help. Startups in Israel are not necessarily big commercial organizations. We're not, you have the big organizations that this is what they do. They know how to take products and commercialize them. So we'll definitely need help along the way. If it comes to be a merger acquisition, if it comes as an IPO, we do need finances to help us support expansion. But I think the core of the knowledge and the enthusiasm that we have here as a team is unparalleled, really unparalleled.
Thank you very much for taking the time. For me, it's been a pleasure learning about your company and hearing from you about your experience. And I hope that our listeners enjoyed as well.
Thank you very much, Avraham. The pleasure was all mine.
That was Keren Leshem, the CEO of Ocon Healthcare. We hope you enjoyed this episode. There are many more to come. Do you have a great innovation or startup idea? We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us by going to our website, jmbdavis.com. And if you go to jmbdavis.com/startup, you'll see we have a special site specifically made for startups to help startups protect their innovations. Please be in touch with us and find out how we can help you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode.